Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Patrick Tan, the General Counsel for ChatArgos, and with me as usual is Jonathan Reiter, the CEO and Chief Data Scientist for ChatArgos, the blockchain analytics and data firm made famous for discovering that Binance's BUSD was under collateralized by 1.4 billion US dollars. Well, it's been an interesting week. We've got quite a bit of stuff that's going on. We're going to try to be systematic about covering all the stuff. We've got the latest decision by Judge Rokov from the US District Court for the Southern District of New York, and I'll help you dissect all of that using whatever quasi-legal knowledge I have. Yeah, it's pretty long. I read it so you guys didn't have to. We'll talk a little bit about that and how that relates to the Ripple decision. I know we talked about that in previous episodes. Also, going to talk a little bit about USDT. Quite a bit of rumblings going on about Tether, what it is and isn't. Just what exactly is going on. You see a lot of so-called FUD going on about Tether and whether it's still, just getting down to the crux of the matter. On this show we want to always be measured in the way we respond to these things.
Or at least factual.
Or at least factual.
If the facts are crazy,
if the facts are crazy, then yes, we'll talk about it. But if there's nothing there, there's just nothing there. We'll talk a little bit about that. There are a lot of conspiracy theories floating around out there. We're not going to deal with all of them. We're going to deal with the more popular ones and try to, hopefully bunk or debunk them. Which one is the right one? Bunk? Well, we'll figure it out.
Another Seinfeld reference.
Finally, on the last note, because we always do these things in threes, we'll talk a little bit about the rumor. This is not the first time we've heard this one, about how the DoJ, that's the Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Justice, is hesitating, or may or may not be hesitating, because that's a rumor. It's it's allegations that they're being slow to potentially prosecute Binance on the grounds of fraud and some other criminal charges, on the basis that they're concerned about the effect that situation would have on the existing users and consumers who are still on that exchange, and that it would cause a run on exchange. And why I don't think that that's really the full story. Of course, people may differ in their thoughts on that. It just doesn't really make sense. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into this decision, the Terraform Labs one. Now, this opinion and order, if you wanted to go and read this...
Well, sorry, go back and give some context. So this is...
Yes. Go ahead. You
well, no, what this hearing is about. So this is not a final decision.
This is not that's exactly what I was going to say. So this is not a final decision. This is, and I want to make that quite clear, because a lot of people are saying that this overrules the Ripple decision. It doesn't. This is a procedural hearing. So this is basically telling Terraform. Long story short, Terraform Labs wanted to dismiss the SEC suit against them on a couple of bases. One is lack of jurisdiction. The other one is because of the court's decision in Ripple, and there's a whole bunch of other reasons. I'm not going to go. We'll go through the ones that matter to the market, and that's all. It's a procedural decision. All it's saying is that the SEC.
And it's a totally standard procedure.
Correct.
So everybody always tries to get their charges dismissed.
Yes.
Always.
So you try to get your charges dismissed so that you don't actually have to go to a full trial. Yeah. So all the district court is saying at this stage is saying that, look, you know what, on the face of it, prima facie if you like, is that there is something to answer here. The SEC does have sufficient grounds to litigate this to prosecute this case. So Terraform Labs has to respond, and it goes forward to trial. That's all it's saying. Now, what's perhaps a little bit more interesting is the reasons that they gave as to why this action can proceed. And I think the most important one that I want to touch on is jurisdiction. So this is an interesting one. A lot of people like to think that, if I incorporate a little offshore vehicle in a beautiful sunny island in the middle of nowhere, and I start issuing tokens out of that, although, on technical level that has no real meaning. But let's say I use that as the corporate shell legal entity to do a lot of my token issuance work and whatever contracts I have and stuff like that. The thinking there is that, the SEC has no jurisdiction on that vehicle as long as I don't directly market to U.S. investors.
You're outside the U.S., so the U.S. has nothing to do with you. Yeah, that's
correct. That's probably a better way to.
It's a basic theory.
Yeah. So I'm outside the U.S., therefore I'm exempt from U.S. That's not what this lawsuit says. This lawsuit actually says, look, mate, if you've communicated in any way to U.S. investors in any way, shape, or form, And to be fair, the Terraform Labs guys, they flew to the US. They had business trips there. They went on road shows.
Sponsor a sports team in Washington, D.C.
Then yes, you're marketing to US investors, and therefore the SEC has jurisdiction. Now, here's the tricky bit. If, let's say now, for instance, your group is completely offshore. None of you guys are Americans.
Whether or not they're American doesn't matter.
Yeah, correct. Whether or not they're American doesn't matter. But let's just say you have no nexus with the US at all, but you put your stuff on YouTube and an American sees it, and as a result of that stuff being on YouTube, and an American sees it, and then they invest or they buy that token, according to this, could be. You could have the SEC could have jurisdiction over your offering.
So I think the could have is what's important here. So I guess the way I read that part of this judgment, this ruling, whatever, is that if you incidentally sell stuff to people in the U.S., but you make a credible attempt to not sell to them without securities registration, the rest of it, you're probably fine in the end, but you at least still have to answer questions and establish that that was the case. If you made it super, super hard for anybody there to access your product, probably you don't even have to answer the case. But you're going to at least have to show up for preliminary motions or something.
You'll have
and
to
demonstrate
you have to show
hard enough
correct,
to be exempt from.
That, like, for instance, you made it such that maybe your YouTube video is region specific. It's blocked in the US. I mean, you've done something.
Or whatever. If your onboarding process requires non-American documentation, you might be able to avoid facing the charges, but you're almost certainly not going to be able to avoid showing up and at least filing a possibly not quite this long brief to explain that your attempt was legitimate. If your attempt is questionable, game on, right? Win or lose, but you have to, enter the fight.
The next thing is, I hate to break it to you, bros. This crypto industry is pretty small. Nobody really cares about it. Nobody gives a shit.
This is the major questions thing.
All of that talk about, and this is an argument that Brian Armstrong and the Coinbase guys like to use all the time. Your rules are not clear enough. The SEC is overstepping. You guys are moving. Now, if you look at the case law, there have only been 5 decisions in the past of any U.S. court which have ever found that a regulatory agency has overstepped and overreached. And it's a favorite argument of a lot of the crypto bros. Oh, SEC is overreaching. They have no jurisdiction over it. Now, if you look carefully at the jurisprudence, you'll know. You don't even need to be a lawyer. I'm a make-believe lawyer, so you don't even really need to be a real lawyer to understand any of this stuff. So if you read that stuff and you look at it and you see that for you to mount that sort of argument, your industry has to be incredibly significant to the economy of the United States. To give you an example, one of those cases was with the tobacco industry. Yeah. Holy cow, is that big? That's huge.
Well, that was the main industry in the Western Hemisphere for about 150 years. It's a long time ago, but that's a major employer, and this is around the tobacco lawsuits.
Correct. This is around the tobacco lawsuits. I would even argue that vaping is probably bigger than crypto. I think it's quite possibly bigger than crypto.
Well, yeah, okay. So the relevant example there would be like whether or not the FDA or the food or health or medical whatever authorities have the ability to regulate that kind of thing, and even that was decided. No, it's not such a big thing. It's also important to say that the question of whether the regulator has jurisdiction doesn't mean all their decisions are right.
That's true.
So they can have jurisdiction and be wrong. Nobody's saying the regulator is infallible. They are saying it's extremely hard to escape having to, again, sort of enter the courtroom and argue with the regulator. That's a thing that you're going to have a lot of
trouble with. It's going to be difficult to say that any regulatory agency, especially one where, hey, if it looks like a security, it acts like a security, and it trades like a security, oh, you know what, SEC is overreaching. It's very difficult to
saying that these policy questions are too large and important to be left to regulatory discretion. The invention of the telegraph might have qualified. But this is not that.
This is not that. Yeah, and it's pretty delusional. But hey, you know what? This is crypto. That's what everybody's here for, right? The delusion.
There was a dispute over a will. A model had married a very old, wealthy guy in Texas, and motions arising from the Anna Nicole Smith and her then dead husband's family, whatever, suing over who got the inheritance of billions of dollars in Texas. That resulted in major constitutional changes in the U.S.
Yeah.
Not because the substance was in fact that important itself, but procedural issues randomly arose from things. So they're open to talking to people about just about anything, but saying, we're too important for this. That's just not going to. it doesn't work in that direction.
And to be fair, I mean, just look at the numbers. It's really not that big, guys. Come on, let's just, I know you like to think it's big, but it's how you use it that counts. So moving on to the last point.
Well, okay, on a more adult version of that comment, I was going to say, crypto mining stuff in general is a consumer of semiconductor products. And semiconductor is a big, industry, and computer stuff in general is a large part of the economy in the world, whatever. Crypto stuff as a fraction of sort of capital investment in the semiconductor industry is irrelevantly small.
Yep.
And nobody would suggest that in general sort of semiconductor type stuff is exempt from some sorts of whatever rules. It's not that big a piece of most bits of the economy.
And finally, something that Justice Rakoff says in this decision, which I wrote about on Medium. If you've not seen it, go check it out. It's on our company's Medium page, which is that the application of the Howey test. Now, bear in mind, this isn't a substantive decision on the issues. So whatever Rakoff says doesn't actually affect the Ripple decision per se. The Ripple decision is actually a proper judgment. This is just a decision on a procedural issue as to whether you can take it forward. But he gives us some clues. He rejects outright the same court that decision on the application of the Howey test to say that never did the Supreme Court in Howey put in these additional strictures to say that, you need to know who the sellers are, you need to know who the buyers are in order for this to be a security or an investment contract.
It's the first time anyone's raised this kind of
distinction. There was never any of this additional baggage. I wrote about it extensively in Medium. If you enjoy reading legal pieces, have at it. It's on the long side, so I should just warn you first.
All 6 of our viewers who enjoy that.
Yeah. So and this is and if nothing else, they've always said that the application of the Howey test should be broad enough so that the regulators should have sufficient tools at their hands to do things, which is the primary purpose, which is to protect investors.
As stuff evolves, you still have control.
Yeah, you have. That's at the end of the. Even if you're not sure about any of this stuff, just go back to first principles. Protect investors. That's what this Howey test is about. That's what any of this stuff is about. So, okay, finally, that's that for
okay, last thing.
thing.
The cleanest takeaway here is that once you have conflicting decisions, the appeals court will definitely take it. And if there's enough conflicting decisions, the Supreme Court will eventually definitely take it. So that you have 2 judges even in the same district, not just the same federal district, but the exact same
district,
that have different opinions in some sense, is surely enough for that district court, that appeals court to take it, and you'll get a clearer decision. I don't know that the Ripple one, because it's not settled at the end, actually has much precedent value in the first place. But the conflicting nature of things is sufficient, surely, to start to get some clarity, such as it is, whichever answer they come down with, right? In that
so SEC hasn't said that whether they want to appeal or not, whether they intend to or not intend to appeal that Ripple decision. I think given
Terraform Labs may appeal this, it's enough, right? It doesn't matter. The appeals courts try to avoid answering questions they don't have to answer, and they do like to answer questions that are causing trouble.
Correct. So I wouldn't, this is, I would hang my hat on this nail. It's not over yet, not by a long shot. So anyway, moving on. USDT, Tether, a lot of rumblings, a lot of rumors. What do you make of it? Let's go through rumors one by one.
Okay, we'll start with, Tether released their, I guess we call them financial statements. They look kind of like traditional financial statements. And the big thing that many people seem focused on is the very small amount of cash that they have. They also, their assets as usual consist of some weird stuff. And they had, surplus reserves they're using, or excess reserves, whatever they call it, which is equity, I guess, on the balance sheet in normal terms, that they're going to use to buy back shares and buy some Bitcoin and whatever. A bunch of things. We've gotten a lot of questions from different directions about what it means they have so little cash.
Yeah.
The short answer from me is if I was running Tether, I wouldn't really have any cash either.
True.
So Tether does not guarantee, well, they don't really guarantee redemptions at all.
Like they don't guarantee anything.
But they don't guarantee rapid redemptions.
Yep.
The whole reason Circle got in that mess with money trapped at Silicon Valley Bank is that they promise instant 24/7 redemption, so they need a whole bunch of cash so they can deal with stuff on the weekends, holidays, evenings, whatever, when banks are not open. To some extent, that's true. To some extent, that's a made-up issue. But you need some kind of cash to settle stuff in some sense. If all of your money is tied up in bond portfolios and repo transactions, even if the market's open 24/7, somebody has to go out there and sell them, unwind them, recall the loans, whatever it is. Since Tether doesn't guarantee that, right? Let's say Tether's target is next day redemption. I'd leave all the money in T-bills or something like that, and then you sell them and you pay them the money the next day.
Yeah.
There are overnight deposit instruments that pay above zero, right? Lots of people in crypto seem to think banks don't pay any interest. In retail amounts, that is often true.
Yes.
For commercial amounts, that is never true, right? So you can use money market funds. There's a number of interbank overnight deposit type structures and reverse repo and whatever. Lots of things you can do with 7 to 8 figure and up amounts of money. None of this is a problem, right? Certainly for 9 figure amounts of money, none of this is a problem at all. So there's no reason for Tether to have any cash other than incoming money that hasn't been invested yet. Maybe you leave some tiny buffer there. They have millions of dollars, whatever. We don't know if this company is funding Tether's operational stuff as well. There have been, over the years, different Tether entities whose names sound more like they're the opco as opposed to the, in this case, I guess it's the holdco or the portco or whatever, the thing with the money in it. If this thing is running Tether's operations, then it needs some money to, literally keep the lights on, pay the rent, pay the salaries, whatever it is. If it's really just the investment vehicle, yeah, that thing has no reason to hold much cash at all. The balance sheet was pretty heavy on the claimed whatever stated in assets on stuff that seems fine, right? Bank deposits, reverse repo, treasury bills. Okay, I mean, they have weird, non-U.S. treasury bills. There are government obligations in U.S. dollars that are very highly rated that aren't U.S. government obligations. There aren't a lot of them. That's not a big thing, but the number's not very big. They still have their other investments in crypto, whatever their weirdness. But it looks like if you take their financial statements at face value, that doesn't look like it's horrendously run. They're probably taking more risk than I would, but they're investing all the cash. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's basically, not having a whole bunch of cash in Tether is not unreasonable.
It's what a well-run fund would look
correct.
like.
We're not saying that this is a well-run fund, but we are saying that that's not a smoking gun. That's not something to be like, look at what's going on over there. That's not what this is. This is, what I mean? Like if they had 2%, 1% in cash, and the other 98, 99% in treasury bills.
But I would find it much harder to believe if they said, we have $40 billion on deposit at banks. And
that's
paying 4.5%.
I would actually find that much more suspect.
Unlikely, yeah. And that's also a worse procedure.
Well, I mean, we don't even have to go too far to find a good example. Look at Circle's USDC.
Yeah, no, I mean, deposit insurance is not available in huge amounts.
Yeah.
If you leave the money, and they probably don't have access to proper banks, so.
Deposit insurance on an offshore bank.
Yeah, this is not
it's non-existent. Yeah. So and Circle would have known that. Look, they only had deposit insurance up to the first $250,000.
Well, you could use the deposit insurance networky, whatever stuff. Circle could have done a bit better.
They could have done better, but they didn't do anything. So this is not the smoking gun.
Their solution in the end was to move the money to Bank of New York, which is fine.
Yep.
I think the odds are really small that Tether can open a bank account with a multi-billion-dollar balance at Bank of New York or J.P. Morgan, Tether International. That's not a thing that's happening. None of this conversation would be occurring if that was available to them.
Yep.
I don't think anybody's surprised by that.
Okay, what about the rumor that's been going around that, we've seen yet again Binance. We know that Binance's stablecoin products are distinct and separate from Tether. We talked about this many times on the show. Looking at the behavior of all the major actors, looking at the way when BUSD went off the rails, they didn't. The logical thing at that point in time would have been to go to Tether, but they didn't. They went to the true dollar, and then now they've got this FDUSD stuff. That's a different conversation for another episode. But what do you think about that? What do you think about?
Okay, so to whatever extent, people used to refer to the Tether exchanges, meaning basically FTX,
Bitfinex,
some of the other Bitfinex,
in the early days,
OKX, whatever,
yep.
KuCoin, maybe, Huobi, and Binance, as a kind of a single grouping of things. And maybe that was a single entity in some sense for a while, big uses of Tether. But it's clear by now that either Binance and Tether are coordinating very carefully to make it look like they don't get along anymore, or they've really broken up. Right? One of those things has got to be the case. It's more likely
they've really broken up.
Something like that. Given there's now been some public, not exactly spats, but now Tether is not, as we've discussed many, many times, an onshore banking product. So they're not going to see a lot of inflow, outflow, retail-y type stuff. And maybe the reason Binance chose not to use them is that they wouldn't function as a retail on-ramp, off-ramp mechanism because it never really has, right? They used to be able to wire their money through Alameda and do some of this, but presumably nobody's trying that route anymore since that exploded. Binance has decided to associate itself with a number of more conventional fiat-backed, I don't mean conventional in the overall sense, but like True Dollar and FDUSD, whatever, or a trust company, some dollars, and looks more like that. Now, everybody's fighting to collect interest on the float, and Tether, because they have a huge amount of money and don't have to redeem for anybody, has done a pretty good job at keeping the pile and collecting interest on the float. Binance is going to struggle if they want to go after, maybe they can capture some fresh dollars, but capturing the historical dollars is going to be a challenge. Circle, because Circle had promised forever super easy minting and burning, super easy redemption, super easy onboarding of funds. Circle's seen their market cap collapse through no fault of their own. I mean, the money's leaving from Circle because Circle's the easiest way to get the money out. And they did the right thing and they got screwed by it. What is the no good deed goes unpunished? Such is life. And Tether doesn't make those promises. Binance, I suspect, is going to struggle to get a meaningful amount of money in their tokens because people can pull the stuff out too easily, and there's an undercurrent, and you can see this in the overall stablecoin market cap, the USDC market cap going like this. There's an undercurrent of people trying to pull dollars out. That's stressing a lot of parts of the space. It's not hugely surprising. Tether probably wants Binance to set these things up and use them as vehicles to get the money into Tether, and Binance probably wants to get the money into Binance's orbit and collect the money. Binance, Justin Sun, whatever's going on with some of these stablecoins. Now interest rates are 5%. People were easygoing about this in 2020, 2021 when the float didn't earn any money. Now that it's 500 basis points higher, you're going to have a lot more fighting. None of this is surprising at all. Liquidity is ample when rates are zero and challenging when rates are higher. Again, that's completely standard.
So, there you go.
The fighting doesn't surprise me at all. There's more fighting over balances when interest rates are higher. Yeah.
So, nothing that we've seen so far, at least on the evidence.
It doesn't require there to be any money missing or any real arguments. This could just be a straight-up business dispute where one guy managed to ring-fence a huge pile of cash, the other guy wants a bit of it, and now they're fighting over who can get the money. Because Tether doesn't provide a usable product for the end user. Even Bitfinex is not a major trading exchange for retail users. Right? So Binance owns the casino, Tether owns the chips. Yeah, that's a good analogy, actually.
It's a good one. And finally, what were we going to talk about? The last topic.
We can have a little bit on the curve stuff if you want.
Let's talk about
that's kind of amusing.
Okay. So the curve one. That's something we didn't deal with. Let's just talk about curve then.
So curve is a stable coin trading or a low volatility asset trading automated market maker. So the pricing function on curve is meant to sort of suppress volatility on the theory that the price will come back to where it was earlier. Stable coins were the original motivating case. Now, the founder of Curve has a huge number of Curve tokens because DeFi founder has a whole bunch of their own tokens, fair enough, and had borrowed against them in a lot of places, all kinds of other protocols. And some of those things seem to be running out of money as the prices of some of these tokens have dropped. As a result, potentially catastrophically large liquidations are looming, and that guy's been trying to sell more of his unpledged Curve for cash to pay back loans and to sort of decrease leverage in the ecosystem overall. As of now, he's found, about a dozen or so OTC buyers of his tokens. What happens when you pledge tokens into a lending protocol to take out over-collateralized loans? In some sense, you've just sold the loans, sold the tokens at the liquidation price. In traditional finance, this is known as an at-worst order. So sell 50, my at-worst is 30. That means I'll come back with a fill later, but the worst number I'll give you is 30. You might ask somebody to guarantee you an at-worst level before executing the order, whatever it is. Yeah, well, they came pretty close to executing at the collateral liquidation price, right? That's where you've sold. And if there aren't enough dollars in the system to buy into that liquidation, bad debt's created and the whole thing will collapse. The system's coming pretty close to that. The real question from a macro perspective is, are these OTC buyers bringing in new dollars, or are they simply taking dollars from another part of the ecosystem? Because unless enough money exists inside the whatever DeFi trading space as a whole to make good on these borrowings, liquidations, this thing going to collapse at some point anyway. And this is just making it worse. It's eerily reminiscent of Do Kwon's occasional attempts to keep things up. And then, of course, it gets bigger and bigger. And then if there aren't enough dollars inside, it's going to zero anyway. If people bring in fresh dollars to buy this guy's curve, it may all be completely fine. We have no way of knowing where the money came from. There's a real flow of funds macro question here that is an open question as of now. One way to find out is to wait and see if things still go to zero. If things recover a bit, that does not mean that it's fine.
The thing about curve, a lot of people don't realize is that when it happens, it's immediate. It's not a gradual slide off because that's the way the pools are designed.
Okay, so the weird thing here is that curve is designed to suppress volatility on stablecoin prices, but the curve governance tokens have been pledged into other protocols to borrow huge amounts of money, and that's sort of now reflecting back on possible volatility or whatever difficulties with the curve protocol. If the tokens are, one outcome is the tokens have more diffuse ownership and it's a more decentralized setup. That's okay, but what is the market clearing price if you dump these tokens into the market and people have to pay with money they have on chain already? Probably a lot lower than than where these things were pledged. Maybe the price at which it clears is higher now that some more money has come in, but we don't know if it's fresh money or just recycling of other money.
Oh, and one last thing, just a bit of bonus content before we forgot, because we might have missed it while we're talking about the curve stuff. This rumor about the DoJ being hesitant to prosecute potential fraud charges or criminal charges even against Binance and some of its key staff on the basis that they're concerned some users would suffer some loss as a result of their action. Now, this is my view. I could be wrong. But that doesn't make any sense. To me, there have been more than enough warnings. First they shot out the CFTC. That to me is like a shot across the bow. Then there was the SEC suit. That one, it's you didn't take it on the chin, but definitely the punches are starting to land closer and closer. You can see that the and if you're still not paying attention, and if you as a consumer are still trading on this unregulated exchange, then come on, it kind of feels like it's your fault now, not the DOJ's.
I certainly agree with you in a sort of moral sense that to the extent that people who are trying to use some offshore exchange deserve what they get in the first place, there's no regulatory protection. Fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, a number of warnings have gone out. But government agencies in general do not want anybody to blame them. Even in the case of FTX, which just collapsed by itself, of its own avail in the space of about 2 weeks, people are still blaming the government for that one, right? So if any government action occurs short before Binance collapses, what is the Latin phrase for after it therefore because of it?
I don't remember.
Okay, there's a post hoc ergo propter hoc. That's the one. After it, therefore because of it. So if Binance collapses soon after some government action, a reasonable number of people are going to blame the government. Not reasonable people, a reasonable number of people. And they don't want that. They would love, to the extent they find something that's not okay, for it to collapse on its own. So their, warning shots are part of the thing, escalating the process to get it to tip over the Coke machine slowly. Fine. I can believe that there is some hesitation because they will be blamed even if it's not their fault. Look, Binance is not supposed to be a leveraged platform.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have everyone's money, it is clearly Binance's fault for not having everyone's money.
Yep.
It's possible they were hacked or the money was stolen and it's not their fault and that they weren't, criminals, they were just victims of crime. Whatever. It's still their fault in some sense if all the deposits aren't there.
Well, if your bank got robbed and you didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, no. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying it's their fault anyway because their job is to have all of everybody's money. But do you really, as a regulator, want to go on TV and say, you people's money was gone 3 years ago and you didn't realize it? Sorry, we made you realize that you'd been had. That's just not a position they want to be in. More and more warning shots getting people to pull out. Look, if a spontaneous run on the bank caused the thing to collapse, FTX style, they'd still be blamed.
Yeah.
So I can see them wanting to push the thing over from a distance and prosecute afterwards. This is one of the reasons why in the United States, regulators often come in after the collapse.
Yeah.
Because people blame them anyway.
But
people will blame if it's before.
Correct. I get that. People can blame them anyway, but I think the idea that you can sit there and allow a crime to go... Because, wait...
I'm not saying I'm describing what happens.
Correct.
Right?
So, but the thing is, and with the articles that came out, is not just that the DOJ is going slow, but the DOJ is looking for other
Yes.
remedies which would be less serious than if they went after them with like perhaps some serious criminal charges. I'm not of the opinion that that's the case because that makes no sense. That you would dial down the, like for instance, if we uncover the fact that this senator is guilty of murder, it would affect some of his staff or some stuff like that. You know what I mean? All his staff will get fired. No, you haul him up.
Well, okay, so I think the open question here, Binance is the largest crypto exchange in the world by volumes and user counts, whatever, and the rest of it. But we don't know if Binance is really the top of the pyramid here in the overall ecosystem. So it is conceivable. I mean, there are no exchanges bigger than Binance, right? So you're talking about something else out there. But it's conceivable that Binance could provide information on somebody else, right? And then giving them a deal, because I'm just saying we don't really know what's going on here. So I don't find it impossible to believe that lesser charges could be offered in exchange for assistance in prosecuting somebody, right? Sam and CZ are the two highest profile exchange operators. There's the Tether people, and then there's who really knows who else doing a lot of this stuff.
I mean, if we're going to go on that tangent, then the next level up has to be aliens.
Okay, well, I mean, maybe those are real as well. I just mean that it is conceivable to me that Binance has information. Look, Binance doesn't keep Binance's bank accounts open. So there's clearly other stuff that connects to other parts of the world going on here.
Maybe, I don't know.
We don't dig into or speculate on what that stuff is, but I don't, it's conceivable Binance has things to say about people. I don't know.
And on that note, that's it for this week. See you next week.